Well, joining me now is viral online debater and advocate of universal healthcare, Jovan Bradley. Jovan, appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. Nice to meet you, Carl.
So what's your case for universal healthcare? Why is it good and what are the pros?
So basically, when we look at the way healthcare is now, America is overspending. We're overspending, we're underinsured, and we're receiving worse care than like the next 7 countries under us combined per our spending. So right now we have so many people who are underinsured and not getting any sort of healthcare benefits that we're just seeing people having to go to GoFundMe or other types of resources just to get any sort of care at all.
Sure, but of those other 7 countries that you say are above us in healthcare, which one of them are out innovating America?
So we definitely have like the most specialists. It's one of the beautiful things about the American healthcare system. Compared to all the other countries, we outpace them. But when we look at the quality of care, we're receiving less quality of care than the rest of them. When we look at access to care, when we look at administrative bloat, and when we look at equity of quick care, we're receiving less than all of those other countries.
So we actually, and to your point, yes, we outpace medical innovation by almost a factor of 7 to the next country, which is Great Britain. But I would ask though that if you start taking some of that money that is spent on innovation and learning new techniques, that's why people from all over the world, including those 7 countries that get, quote, better healthcare than America, they all come here for their most effective and most serious procedures. I would say, don't you run the risk of burdening it if you need to provide everybody with the bare minimum?
Well, so they don't come here as often as a lot of people think. There is something called medical tourism where you do go to other countries for care, but even Americans participate in medical tourism when we're going to other countries to get pharmaceuticals. So this idea that like we're the country that's going to prevent that is just categorically not true. The other issue that we run into is that we're spending more per person than all of these other countries combined. So you might see a little bit of a run on hospitals if universal health care gets put in, but it's going to level itself out just like it has in most of these other countries.
How do you pay for it, though? That's the problem.
So there's multiple ways, but right now we're paying more per person than all of these other countries. Right now, per person, we're spending about $12,900, whereas Canada, for instance, is only spending about $5,000 per person for healthcare. So we're already overspending. 15 to 30% of all healthcare expenditure is administrative bloat. These are things that we really don't need.
But how do you fund it on a nation for a universal program? Where's that money come from?
So there's a lot of different ways that people are, asking to fund it. Bernie Sanders talks about capital gains tax and employment tax. But I think what we would see is because we would have a drop off in things like deductibles, premiums, co-pays, co-insurances, that it would eventually
what country are you referring?
Like
what countries are you conflating them with, though? Like
so
which
I
one has a
compare
good
us
system?
a lot to. I compare us a lot to Canada and the NHS over in the UK, because those are going to be 2 countries with populations similar to ours, not in terms of size, but in terms of like socialness. So I compare it a lot to that, which is why I say like Canada, again, pays about $5,000 per person, where we spend about $13,000 per person.
Yeah, Canada has about like 10% of the population of America. Also, the UK, actually, here's an article from the New York Times. The UK has 12-hour waits in the ER. But the other problem, too, as you messaged Canada, is that Canada, your tax bracket, your upper income tax bracket of almost 50% kicks in when you make $40,000 a year. Are you prepared to tell people in America that if you make 40 grand, you got to cough up 20 of it to the government?
Yeah, so a few things. When I was talking about the population, I wasn't talking about size. So when we look per capita, that's where we see the increase in spending. America is 12,000 per capita. Canada is 5,000 per capita. When we look at whether we're going to increase taxes, because we see what Canada is doing, we can do the opposite, right? So usually what's proposed is a tax on people making over, usually it's people making over $400,000, where we would go to a marginal tax increase, sort of like what we had in the 50s and 60s, where the tax bracket on those was around 91%.
Tax the rich there's no numerical data to support that. But Jovan, we appreciate you coming on. We appreciate the debate.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.